Project RAV4X4 has been occupying this spot in my garage for about the last month or so I thought it was high time for an update video. So, here's an update video. If you watched the video where I introduced you to my 1997 Toyota RAV4, you know that there are a few issues with my $1,500 purchase. Mostly it was the kind of stuff you'd expect from a car that costs the same as a new iPhone. It had an exhaust leak, the engine had the same oil retaining properties as an old sock, and the interior was one sneeze away from being declared a total biohazard. There were also a few other unique problems, like a gas tank being held on by some string. Since I've owned several shoelaces that have broken unexpectedly, I decided to first address the gas tank issue. I ordered a couple of replacement gas tank straps off of Amazon for $55, which of course included free shipping. Now, it was pretty easy to cut off the old shoestring, but some of the bolts that were holding on the various shields underneath the car, they were rusted in place and ended up snapping off, so that was a bit of a bummer. But the actual bolts that were holding on the failed gas tank strap, they were still loose and I could get them off, so putting in the replacement part was a snap. Next, I turned my attention to the engine. Now, the 2-liter 4-cylinder in this car uses a timing belt, which Toyota recommends replacing every 90,000 miles or 7 years, something like that. But given the overall condition of the entire car, my guess is that the previous owner wasn't exactly a stickler for routine maintenance. There's a lot of while you're in there kind of stuff people recommend doing when you're doing the timing belts on these engines. So I bought a number of various parts, some pulleys, seals, a water pump. And again, I sourced all that from Amazon, and the total parts spend was about $90 for that. The book says it should take a competent mechanic about 4 hours to do the timing belt and all the other bits, but it only took me 3.5 days. But in my defense, I spent an entire day reassembling the engine and then banging my head against the wall because I couldn't get the timing right. I eventually decided to take everything off and just check everything and discovered that the belt they included in my kit was slightly too big, so it was just impossible to get the timing correct. So I made a trip to AutoZone and bought the right size belt for $25. The oil pan gasket appeared to be the source of my RAV4's biggest oil leak, so I decided to tackle that next. Getting out all the various bolts from the weird angles and hidden behind things turned out to be a 1,400 swear word job, but I did finally get all the bolts out. It was only at that point that I realized you have to take the exhaust off to even drop the oil pan, which proved impossible because all the bolts in the exhaust system were just welded in place with rust. So, yada yada yada, I now have a bigger exhaust leak to deal with. With the exhaust system out of the way, I was able to drop the oil pan, replace the gasket, and then reinstall it. In theory, this should have solved my oil leak, but I'll remind you that in theory, communism works. The new oil pan gasket was leaking just as badly as before, so I ordered another gasket along with an entire oil pan just in case the one I had was bent. It wasn't, because that one leaked just as badly as the first one, so I did the sensible thing and gave up and moved on to another project, which was to clean this filthy interior. I went at it pretty hard with a steam vac and a healthy dose of spot remover. It actually came out a treat. I was expecting to get out a few of the stains, but pretty much everything came clean in this. The interior really does look like the interior of a 25,000 mile car, not a 250,000 one. While I was on a cosmetic binge, I also removed the pinstripes from my RAV4. I think it looks a lot better without them, and it's also gonna work better for something I have planned for this project down the road. And finally, I swapped out the junky CD player that came in this car for a new unit that's got Bluetooth for phone and audio. But really, the biggest selling point was a blue and pink color scheme that perfectly matched the 90s motif of my RAV4. And so that's the latest progress report on Project RAV4X4. Thus far, it's been a lot of work, and I still have a lot more to do. Even though I'd like to ignore it, I really do have to address that leaking oil pan because it is gushing out of there. And I have to wrap that up before I can even think about installing the new exhaust system. But once I wrap all that, along with a few other odds and ends, I'll be able to get on to the fun stuff. My Old Man Emu lift kit has finally arrived from Australia, and I'm really excited to get that on the car. I also have a new set of mud tires to mount, which should look awesome, and I've got a rad set of K-seat driving lights for the front. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a minute of the fun, and as always, thanks for watching.